Hello and welcome to today's webinar, SEO for Branded Search. Tell us where you're from and do you have a personal knowledge panel in Bing or Google, or if you manage to trigger it for some other entity such as your company or website or product. Don't hesitate to ask questions all the way through. I'll be tracking them and we'll make sure that our glorious experts will answer some of those. You can do that in the chat box, and I also suggest that you subscribe to do those newsletters or other webinars in the future in order not to miss them. This one is recorded, but we'll be very happy if you can join us live and chat with us. Once again, it will be SEO for Branded Search, why it is vital to your bottom line, and what you need to do along the way. And now let's present our speakers. Jason, the Brand SERP Guy, and SEO's only hope, as John Mueller himself called you. What can you add to that?
Oh, there's not very much you can add to John Mueller saying we're SEO, or I am SEO's only hope. He also called me the knowledge panel guy, I think, Mr. Knowledge Panel, I think he called me. But I've actually got a presentation at the beginning of my talk, so I'm going to just say I'm the Brand SERP Guy. I love to analyze and optimize and try to understand how Google builds the SERP, the search engine results page, that represents your brand to your audience when they search your name.
Okay. Then Koray Gübür, is it right?
Yes.
Holistic SEO expert. And I know that you are among those very few people, actually maybe counted on with the fingers on one hand, that not only read patents, but also are able to understand them and implement them effectively. Is it right?
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Can you tell us more about yourself?
My name is Koray Gübür, and I am the owner and founder of Holistic SEO and Digital. And most of the time, this is a kind of intro for my articles or all of my YouTube videos, and sometimes even the tweets. And I try to focus on every vertical of the SEO, and I can tell you that it's not so easy to do since 2019, because every vertical of SEO is already so deep, from local SEO to the entity-oriented search, or for data science approach, or to do page speed optimization or web page loading timing performance optimization. There are many books between every vertical. So I try to catch people. It's not so easy, but I try my best.
Okay. Now,
I hope my voice is clear, by the way.
I think yes. I think it's good.
Okay.
Okay. Dave Davies, lead SEO for Weights and Biases, and it's the machine learning company. And you're also one of my favorite authors on Search Engine Journal. Yeah. Can you tell us more about yourself?
Sure. I guess obviously I'm interested in machine learning. I'll in this sort of intro piece just sort of confess, and Jason's heard this story before, with a sort of embarrassing note. The first time I met Jason, it was at a conference years ago, and we were talking about Brand SERP, or I was introduced to Jason as the Brand SERP Guy, and knew him as Brand SERP, and had thought to myself at the time, oh, isn't that cute? Like sort of like a little subset of real SEO, right? Like that was just sort of like the approach, like that I had, this mentality that I had, and then now this enormous recognition at somewhere in the last 5 years of going, oh, actually it's the cornerstone. Actually understanding your entity status and understanding how to control your brand SERP is actually just the foundation of every good SEO strategy that could possibly exist there. So a big sort of confession on mine for my arrogance and lack of insight into exactly what we're talking about now today. And thankfully, because of pioneers like Jason in the area, I was able to sort of catch up, because they're sharing their knowledge as much as they do.
Okay, thank you very much. Myself, I'm Olesia Korobka. I'm just a SEO entrepreneur running my own few projects, and recently I've also started working with startups. And maybe they have this brand search problem, especially when they are closer to the investor roundups. So maybe we'll talk about that right after your presentation. Jason, maybe you are ready to share it with us. And
yeah, brilliant. Absolutely wonderful. I mean, to be honest, three of my favorite people in the entire industry, both as human beings and as super duper smart people. And Dave, that introduction is delightful because I know I talk to people about it and they think, oh, it's not very important, but it is fundamentally important. Koray, I understand you because you say, I try to dig down into something and it's such a deep rabbit hole and it's so hard to get out. And I have so much respect for Dave for your writing. As Olesia says, you're by far my favorite writer in the industry. And Koray for actually understanding the patents you read. And as Olesia said, implementing the stuff. It's astonishing. And Olesia, I know you ask the hard questions, but the hard questions are the good questions and the questions we need to answer. And I'm deeply, deeply happy that you asked me a hard question the other day, and I've included the answer in the presentation just this afternoon because I thought Olesia scares me so much. I don't want her to ask me that question and I don't have an answer. So how to own your branded search. Now, I focus on brand SERPs, but this is going to be about a slightly wider topic. So I'm adventuring into uncharted territory slightly. But that isn't to say I don't know what I'm talking about. It just means that I'm widening the sphere of what I'm talking about. And as Dave said, it becomes not only the cornerstone, but all the bricks on that foundation. And I think we really need to focus on that. So I call myself the Brand SERP Guy, which is actually now looks like the Brand Duda, which is slightly embarrassing. And the reason for that is that I focus on what appears what Google shows, in fact, when you search a brand name, a person's name, or any entity name, as we'll see later on. Now, the idea is I'm also the knowledge panel guy. Mr. Knowledge Panel, according to John Mueller, which is delightful. And that's terribly charming. It makes me giggle like a schoolgirl to think about it. John is a great guy. He's very supportive. And it's delightful for me to be recognized by somebody at Google, somebody of his stature, as somebody who knows a great deal about knowledge panels. I hope I do, but I'm currently living in Paris. And as you can see, I'm going to start telling my story through my brand SERP, and that's the idea. My brand SERP should represent who I am, what I do, who my audience is. So I live in Paris, as you can see from this. I was a voice actor in a previous life, Cartoon Blue Dog, as you can see from these results, IMDb. You can see the blue dog there. It was a delightful TV show. I was a punk folk musician. That's the barking dogs down there in the right-hand corner. That gets a small place because it isn't a big part of my current life. I'm managing to dominate my brand SERP with my current life, which is a digital marketer and a podcast host. I have a groovy podcast, which is apparently intelligent, interesting, and fun. Dave's been on it, Olesia's been on it, and Koray has been on it, and that is absolutely delightful. And we have Eric Camilleri from Paris who has joined us, which is delightful. I'm also an author. I got the author boxes a few weeks ago. Absolutely delighted about that. And I've now written a book, but I was writing the book to get the author panel. And now I've got the author panel without the book, so it was a bit of a waste of time, but I think the book will be pretty good. Finished it yesterday, should be out next week. And I also founded a company called Cube, and we deal with brand SERPs. We help our clients optimize them. We have a SaaS, a set of courses, and a book. And if you've forgotten, I am the Brand SERP Guy. That is my brand SERP. I've been working on that for 7 years, and it gives you a good idea about the time it takes to actually get your Google business card right, to get Google to show your brand message the way you want it to your audience when they're searching for your brand name, your personal name, or whatever entity you happen to be looking after. Now, the approach today is going to be incredibly exciting. There are 3 types of branded search. You've got the exact match brand SERP, which is what I focus on. That's very much navigational or informational, where the person looking or searching this brand name is navigating to your site or finding more information about you. And that, as you can imagine, makes that SERP incredibly interesting, incredibly important, incredibly valuable to you as a business. Then there are the branded terms around your brand, the bottom and post funnel, which are generally informational, can also be commercial, but certainly the product SERP, which is the next level down, is the commercial stuff when people are looking for your products and looking to buy that product because they know about that product. And we're going to come to all that in a moment. The interesting thing that I discovered when I wrote this or started preparing this slide deck, is that basically a product SERP becomes a brand SERP. And so we actually loop back to the top, and then we can go back down this list again. And that's the point of the talk today. It's to go through all of these different branded searches and identify a fact that they are all in some way a brand SERP. So they're all part of my, don't know what we can call it, stratosphere, because it's so vast. Now, I'm going to start with my favorite topic, which is the exact match brand name, the brand SERP. And I'm talking about the exact match brand name. What appears when your audience searches your name on Google? What do they see? And an exact match brand SERP can be navigational primarily for well-known brands such as Facebook. Now, SimilarWeb provide this data. 96% of people click on that first link or one of the site links. That's astonishing. And I was talking to Nathan Chalmers from Bing, who is the whole page algorithm guru at Bing. And he said, Facebook's a great example. We use that because we know the vast, vast majority of people who search for Facebook just want to go to the site. It's pure navigation. But for a lesser known brand like Kalicube, you're looking at something which is more informational. People have heard about us. They don't necessarily want to go straight to the site, but they certainly want to learn about us. And this is where your Google business card, or in this case, the Bing business card, becomes vitally important. Why have I put Bing here? Because Bing might be smaller. It's still, whatever country you're in, it will vary, but perhaps 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% of the traffic that you're going to get, or the people who are searching your brand name or your branded terms. And the other interesting thing is everything you're doing to build your brand SERP for Google is going to help with your brand SERP on Bing. And I looked at this a couple of days ago. Bing actually does a better job than Google. Hate to say it, but the work I've been doing on Google has actually produced better results on Bing than it has on Google. And yet the results I produce on Google are absolutely perfect for me. So Bing is giving me double perfect for no extra cost, which is delightful. Next, we move on to the idea that either way, the brand SERP represents Google's or Bing's understanding of your brand and your relationship with your audience. And as we'll see later on, also your reputation in its eyes. I just focus on page 1, and you can see here 2 page 1s for 2 different brands, but you can look much deeper, and Dave was talking about this the other day. Looking on pages 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is incredibly insightful. But my aim today and over the last couple of years has been to get people to start looking at page 1. And the story for the another day is once we start looking at page 1, we can start thinking about pages 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And Dave is being a little bit ambitious, a little bit too quickly, although I know that you've delved into it, so that isn't a fair comment, and I do apologize. Now, this is the question that Olesia asked the other day, and I had to include it because the challenge was launched. What KPI for a brand SERP? And it's actually pretty simple. At Kalicube Pro, we've got SaaS, software as a service, and we actually track 70,000 brands entities, and we've developed a score, which is the quality sentiment score and the control score over in the right top corner, covered by the Doodah logo, unfortunately. And the idea here is, say, you need maximum control. So in this case, as dark a blue as you possibly can, in order to influence the results so that we have maximum quality, which is the green that we have here. Now, I've been working on Kalicube, my own brand SERP, so I get these great scores pretty much every time. We'll see in a moment that it isn't always like that. I did a mock-up here. And as you can see on Kalicube, you can track that quality over time. As we move through in the UK for the search on Kalicube, we can see that we went from these yellow neutral results, the Twitter boxes that weren't ours, they were somebody else's, through moving up from a score of C to B to A, indicating that we've gone from not the greatest Google business card in the world in the UK to a really, really, really impressive business card that's going to impress our audience. And then we can also do that across geo regions. And as you can see, it varies much more than one might expect. Kalicube, obviously, international brand. not a major international brand, but an international brand nonetheless. UK, France, and Canada. That was for you, Dave, because we get the best score in Canada. I think that might be because Dave might be helping me in his spare time at the weekends, but I'm not absolutely convinced about that. So branded SERPs are important for 3 different audiences. And I would always start with the exact match brand SERP. I think one thing is, as you will see in this presentation, it becomes very, very deep. It's a very deep rabbit hole, and it becomes very deep very quickly. And as Koray said, you get lost very quickly in the amount of things you need to do, as opposed to the complexity of the things you need to do. So start with your exact match brand SERP. If you can start sorting that out, it's going to sort out a lot of the other problems around the brand, as we'll see. So start with the foundations, start with the cornerstone, as Dave said earlier on, and then build out from there. Now, we're going to look at the 3 types of audiences that it's important for. It's important for your audience. They're your clients, they're your prospects, they're your investors, as you said earlier on, Olesia, people who are in that round of funding. They're your partners, they're people who need to see that you're a credible solution, you're a credible company, you're credible for them to do business with you, whatever kind of business they're going to be doing. And it's your business card. They're going to Google your brand name, whether you like it or not. And if it looks bad, they might jump ship before even starting to do business with you. Or if they're a client, they might jump to the competition if they think you don't look credible enough and your competition looks more credible, because they're probably Googling your competition's brand SERP too. It's also important for Google. It's Google's assessment of your brand. It's Google's opinion of the world's opinion of you. And we could say that's a measure of EAT. If it thinks you're an expert on authority and trustworthy, and it understands who you are, what you do, and who your audience is, your brand SERP, your exact match brand SERP, is going to look phenomenally good. If it doesn't understand you, or it thinks you're not credible, expert, authoritative, and trustworthy, it won't look so good. And it's a really easy KPI, if I may, Olesia, for you to look at to understand how well Google has understood who you are, what you do, and who your audience is, but also to understand what its assessment of your credibility is. And then it's important for you because it's a phenomenal insight into your digital ecosystem. What Google is putting on your brand SERP is exactly what it thinks is valuable, helpful to your audience. It's a prioritized list of what it thinks your audience is interested in. And as you go through the pages, as I said earlier on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you can get a deep insight into all the things that are out there that Google considers to be important. And Google has a phenomenal reach to understand what is important, what is relevant, and what is being looked at, and has an influence on your audience when they're surfing around the rest of the web, interacting or not with your brand. But before we continue, that trio of interested parties applies to all branded search. It's really important to remember that the 3 steps we had earlier on, the exact match brand, the branded terms around that brand, and the products themselves, applies to, all of these 3 audiences are interested in every single term that includes your brand name or a product name. So what to do for the exact match brand SERP? You work to educate Google so that it builds your brand SERP to serve your audience the way you want. And that's important. You spent loads of time, loads of money building up your brand presentation, how you represent your brand. There is no reason on earth why Google would not represent your brand the way you expect it to, the way you want it to. Get your brand message across that you've worked so hard to build and push out on social media and push out onto the PR platforms. Google will represent you the way you want if you educate it to what you want, as long as what you want is fair representation of you. So we're looking at educating Google as opposed to trying to beat the machine. We're educating a child who wants to understand what's important to your audience and what you want to say to them. And if you have fair things to say to them, Google will, in your place, say that to them when they search your brand name. So you need to look at your site obvious. This is where SEO generally stops, my site. And this is where Brand SERP is going to take us into a totally new dimension. It's absolutely delightful. So you start off with your own site, your homepage, the site, rich site links, a different page on your site that people might want to go to, including the login page, interestingly enough, which you might have de-indexed or no indexed. The contact us page, the about page, these are incredibly important. They sit right at the top of the Brand SERP and are phenomenally important and often overlooked in SEO. But you also want to look at your social media, and this is a screenshot from Kalicube Pro that indicates within my industry, these are the social media platforms that dominate, which means that I need to be focusing on these because these are the social media platforms that will dominate Brand SERPs in general and probably appear on my Brand SERP. So social media is something I never paid much attention to until I started looking at the Kalicube Pro data and realized that it's phenomenally important because they dominate the blue links. And which one dominates here? It's LinkedIn, Facebook, Crunchbase, and Twitter. And I need to focus on those, which we've done, and we've improved our Brand SERP immensely simply by focusing on the right social media platforms. And then the content strategy, as you've probably seen, I've got gazillions of videos, and that's been the last couple of years. The idea there is to push the message out, to allow Google to show these great videos and the Crunchbase profile and my own articles about my own company on my Brand SERP, which it does because I'm representing the company. I'm representing myself fairly, honestly. And it gives Google, I don't know how you say it in English because I'm French, although I don't sound it, de la matière. I'm getting a bit confused. I've been speaking French all day and I've forgotten how to speak English. It gives Google content that it can use, this rich content they can use and show on your Brand SERP. And the offshoot of that is that my content strategy is now bringing me in great, thank you, Lydia Infanti. The content strategy that we've built up, the social strategy, is bringing me in clients, and Google is now my bonus, which is a delightful approach. We also want to look at service reviews. They rank very well. They're very good for credibility, EAT, and a PR strategy, pushing out PR so that these media platforms are writing about my brand. Obviously, that's great for inbound links, and that's why most people do it. But I actually do it because I want to help Google to understand, A, who I am, B, that I'm authoritative, C, that my audience appreciates me, and that helps me build a better Brand SERP. And as you can see, by doing PR for my Brand SERP, I'm building links, I'm building credibility, I'm building authority, I'm building a recognition of my expertise. So we're winning on pretty much every SEO front. And of course, a knowledge strategy. This is one thing that we're not going to go into today. Building a knowledge panel, building Google's understanding, phenomenally important. The entity home is your site, a page that represents your entity on your site. And you need to make sure that you get corroboration around the web about who you are, what you do, and who your audience is, so that Google, and let's come back to that, educate Google so that it understands and that it is confident that it's understood. That is your knowledge strategy. Once again, loads of inbound links, loads of EAT going on here. Your SEO strategy is going to go through the roof. Next, search terms that contain the brand name. These are bottom and post funnel. They're people who are either about to buy from you, about to invest in your company, or have already bought from you and you need to keep them on board. So these are branded terms as opposed to the exact match brand name. And there we're looking at this kind of query. I won't read them to you. You can all read. Obviously, I've focused a little bit on Kalicube, and the x-axis is just random company. Let's not worry about that. And there we're looking at questions and answers. And as you can see, as you will see, with this strategy, is the first thing to say is what questions are people asking around my brand, start to answer them and build that out. And as you can see here on the right-hand side, one of my clients, we did this strategy, and we'll see during the presentation how well it actually functioned. We started with our Brand SERP with the PAA, the people also ask, where we didn't answer any of the questions. We answered those questions first, and then we spread out from there. And as you will see, it works an absolute treat. We provided the answers to user questions and gave them the opportunity to learn more about us from us. And this is what happened. We built an FAQ section. We have UBG SIM, which is the product, the brand itself, on the left-hand side, the general questions around eSIMs and the problematic the problems that people have with that on the right-hand side. So we split into two, brand, non-brand. We built the FAQ, and that's the traffic graph, one of those delightful, not quite a hockey stick. This is more of a slow and steady, builds up and becomes phenomenally powerful. We created an FAQ, we created how-tos within that FAQ, we created videos and demos. This isn't actually the site, this was a mistake. This is my own videos and demos because I haven't yet built my own FAQ. And we ended up with UBG dominating the branded searches through how-tos, FAQs, the organic results, the featured snippets. The people also ask on every single search, or pretty much every branded search. And all we did was answer the questions that our customers and our bottom of funnel prospects were asking. Then we, and we then spread that out to answer questions to dominate the topic. And as you can see here, we answer questions around Android eSIMs, Apple eSIMs, iPhone eSIMs, and started to dominate that too. So you're then driving middle of funnel traffic, middle to bottom of funnel that is not branded, and that's where you're getting a new audience. So it really does spread out incredibly well. Then we can move on to second level brand queries, which are products and services. So you have the idea of my exact match brand, my brand plus reviews, or my brand plus how to, and then we have the products. So in the case of our friends at Nike, that would be Air Jordan. In the case of Koray Gübür, it would be the Fundamentals of Brand SERP for Business, which is the book I mentioned earlier on, or it would be Koray Gübür Pro SaaS. So I need to treat these as entities, and every entity has a brand SERP. So actually what we're now doing is going back to the top and saying, now I need to look after my brand SERP for this specific product. Let's call them an entity SERP as we move forward. So what to do? You want to build a great brand SERP for each and every one of your products and services. Treat it as a separate entity. You've built your brand SERP for your company. Then you want to move down and say, now I want to build a great brand SERP for each and every one of my products and services. And at Koray Gübür, we actually have a couple of clients who are starting to do this, and it's phenomenally powerful. And is it phenomenally helpful to their business, in the sense that these product and services queries, entity queries, are much closer to the bottom of the funnel. That commercial intent, we're going to buy. And here you can see I've picked up the Koray Gübür Pro SaaS platform entity SERP, and it looks pretty good. We've got videos because we've been producing videos. We've got rich site links. Pretty much all of that is either totally controlled or semi-controlled, or has those reviews, which is absolutely delightful. So that would be a product SERP, which I would call a brand SERP, entity SERP, that you need to control, you need to optimize, you need to make look like the greatest possible business card for your product or your service. So consider that the exact match product SERP is as important as your brand SERP. Once you've got your brand SERP sorted out, don't run before you can walk. Start with your brand SERP, move on to your product, is my advice. And we can call that the entity SERP. And now we're going to spread it even wider. I mean, the brand SERP rabbit hole just got so much deeper, because every single entity has a brand SERP, and every single entity needs to be optimized. These are my icons, the delightful illustration style that our designer created for us. You've got a corporation, you've got a person, you've got a product, you've got an application, you've got an event, you've got a book, you've got a TV series, you've got a software as a service, you've got a car, you've got a record, you've got a music group, you've got a local business, you've even got a website, which is an entity in and of itself. And they all need to be optimized for their brand SERP. So a reminder that entity SERPs are important for the users, the audience, the people who are looking for that entity. It's important for Google because it's an assessment of its opinion of the world's opinion of that entity. And it's a measure of its understanding of that entity and the audience that is going to be interested by that entity. And we won't go down this rabbit hole, but that has big implications for things like Discover, where Google's going to be pushing information to people because it knows they're interested in that topic. That entity represents that topic, has credibility for that topic. another rabbit hole I will try to avoid going down. I'm not doing a very good job. And entities are also important for you because it's a window into the entity's digital ecosystem. Just like your brand, your product has an ecosystem and you need to look after it. And your brand SERP pages 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is an incredibly good way to see how the world perceives your product so that you can actually put it right. You can deal with those reputation questions, reputation issues proactively and ensure that the product is seen as being valuable and credible for your audience. So to finish up, just to say, I've been working on this for a while. Kalicube offers A to Z solutions for brand SERPs. You have the beginners, the book's coming out next week, the Brand SERP book. We have intermediate, you want to go for the Brand SERP courses where I teach a great deal. I know Dave's done the courses and quite enjoyed them. And we have advanced for the Brand SERP specialist, which is a SaaS platform that helps agencies and experts understand, analyze, and improve the brand SERPs and their digital ecosystem by extension, really from the root, the core of it upwards. So that was my presentation. I've got all the solutions you need at Kalicube, and I've just presented to you all the problems with a general explanation of what the solutions might entail.
It was brilliant. Thank you, Jason. So after your presentation, what we've seen that it is very important, it's beneficial and all that to keep up with the brand SERPs and to optimize for them. But why this work is so underestimated? Even some like big SEOs in the SEO world, they are sometimes underestimating that a bit, underrating, I would say. What can be done to like get more value for the SEO world, for this work?
I think Dave should answer that question because I just talked for 30 minutes straight.
Yeah, I think, like, to me, part of the equation or part of the sort of puzzle fit back together. Oddly, when I started, and Koray's probably read some of the same ones, when I started reading patents and the patents on entities and starting to like put the pieces together and going, oh, wait, no matter what I'm covering on my website, no matter which entities I'm dropping in there, no matter what relationship I might be trying to put out there as far as the topics that I'm covering, if I'm not on my site and on the web as a whole attaching those to me, what value do they have? And so it brought me back to going, oh, wait, I need to solidify my home base first and then start moving these pieces in. And for a lot of companies, you'll already be like well on your way. So, okay, you're sort of like going back and doing your brand after the fact. I've done that many times as well. But it's sort of the foundational to go, all roads lead to Rome. You need to make sure that you're Rome to build those roads too.
And that Rome is clean.
I think that Koray can add to that because you are sharing like real value and your achievements when you do. So that maybe when you share that, you are making it more valuable for everybody. So people start to pay more attention.
Thank you. So I believe most of the SEOs didn't focus on the knowledge panels or information panel. In the patents, they call these knowledge panels as information panel usually. So main reason is that I believe they don't think that they will be able to change them because it takes too much time, first of all. And second of all, since I also started to manage an agency lately, I know that most of the clients, they just want to focus on the big wins, the quick wins all the time. And knowledge panels, they are not quick wins, but I believe that they are big wins actually. And another thing here is that it has a kind of chain of effect because if you are able to define yourself with a different type or with a different types of association with different phrases, you will be able to create a better relevance for that. Imagine that you have a company, but Google didn't associate you or didn't cluster your company with other good companies. And imagine that some other sources shadowed you in the knowledge base or on the SERP or some other types of information graphs. So this is a kind of indirect, but really, really strong effect, and only people with deep understanding can actually see it. And that's why popularization of the knowledge panels or democratization of the knowledge panels on the SERP is really important, and it's a kind of transition phase. So I believe in the future it will be very much more popular because in India, Google already made some experiments with knowledge panels. They created personal knowledge panels for regular users, and now they try to expand that experiment further. So I believe we will have a kind of profile on the SERP. Actually, we already have, but in a more controllable way. And I believe Google will try to make it a kind of homepage for everyone. So a kind of Facebook for everyone on the SERP for the name, and it will change the things. And this is a kind of early step, and Koray Gübür is a kind of pioneer of that stage.
Ooh, I'm glad I didn't interrupt you because you gave us the Koray Gübür is a pioneer in that stage, which is brilliant. I just wanted to add one thing, which is that idea of Google as your homepage is what people in the local SEO space have been saying for years.
Yes.
Google is your business card. It's potentially a homepage. We're moving that way. And the other thing, just before I pass back to Olesia, sorry, is that it will be more controllable potentially. But Google My Business, remember, has, let's say, half of the information that you control through your Google Business Profile management, but the other half is knowledge that Google is pushing in there that you have no direct control over. So even if you have control over your knowledge panel, even if you've claimed it, even if you have that personal profile you were talking about, Koray, you still need to make sure that you solve the fundamental underlying problems of Google's understanding, because otherwise it will fill that knowledge panel with rubbish. Sorry.
Definitely. And I believe also, especially the celebrities, they will need these type of services way much more. For instance, I already have one client in this space, and she doesn't want to be seen as ex-wife for someone from her past, because Google just says that this person is the ex-wife of someone else. So at the moment, she tries to create a kind of digital identity on the SERP, and she wants to be announced with her proficiency, which is a dentist. And she is a really, really successful dentist, and she tries to change this. So on this aspect, also the macro context on the query popularity make these things a bit harder, because all of the queries are just about whether the person divorced or not, who was the ex-husband, etc. So all these queries manage Google to do that context. And at the moment, I try to create more sources and more information for other aspects of the same person entity. So it's a kind of fun area really fun area for the SEOs. It's a kind of communicating with the search engine so that they can change the SERP. So it's a really, really powerful perspective and new battlefield for all the SEOs. Can't tell, it's fun.
I think one area that I think it's overlooked when we're talking about the value of brand SERPs as well is whether you want to be reactive or proactive. Like if you're a business, you don't always know what's going to happen tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now. Jason, you talked earlier, and like, yes, I've taken the courses. You talk about it, so folks, you can sort of hear about it in there. But one of the highlights I think missing is anybody who's ever been hired to do reputation management, ever, is basically following one of the fundamentals of brand SERP is control as much as you can and basically try and plug it only with things that you can control in some way. It may be Twitter, but it's your Twitter. It may be, ideally, and it may be at its core places where you can control the message. I think to that, if you've ignored it and you have a problem, you don't have a place to deal with that. If you have a reputation management problem, and I've seen that many times. It's like, oh, okay, now we're trying to push up the messages and the pages that we want, where we can control the message. And you're sort of having to deal with in the past, rather than being more proactive, covering your brand SERP in the beginning and going, okay, we have a reputation management problem, but it's over here. I need to deal with it, but it's over here. It's not position 3, right? On my brand SERP, where everybody's going, well, don't hire that realtor, right? Like they're horrible and they're a scam artist or something, because somebody ran off and got upset. So I think that's one of the sort of the unsung things, and it's hard to put a KPI on that, because you don't know you needed it until you need it, but you don't know the value of what it would have cost, because thankfully you got ahead of the game.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think that the KPI problem is one of the biggest when you're trying to evaluate this thing, because I know some companies which extract brand traffic from SEO like achievements, so they don't measure it at all. They say they take it for granted so they don't want to want to do anything with that. But I know that, Koray, you told that you had some achievements with your brand traffic, actually.
For my own company or for my client?
For your client company, that you had good results by working with the brand traffic, and you could achieve more for your
actually,
non-branded traffic.
2 of my past SEO case studies include this type of brand SERP optimization as well. Because for one of them, it was a sub company of another really big holding, and I tried to connect that small company to that big holding, and which is a direct signal for the EAT. Because if you have that kind of a connection possibility, you should actually use it. For another one, I have created a new entity registration within the knowledge base by creating some other types of sources. For that one, I can tell you that the biggest signal was, again, the Wikipedia page, but I have used other places too, so that I could justify that Wikipedia page. And after I record or register that specific entity to that specific knowledge base, even the Google My Business profile or even the auto-completions started to change. And one of the most popular methodologies that Google uses is that n-gram matching or n-gram comparison. They can take your definition from third-party references. They can check actually all of the popular n-grams from there, and they can check also the auto-completions or other types of queries, and they can match these things. For instance, if it is about candidate passage answers, they usually use 3 grams. But for another topic, they can use diagrams and etc. And this type of phrase matching methodologies, they actually help search engine to create a better predictable SERP for people's demand. So in my aspect, I actually use these type of entity registrations to be able to create a topical relevance for that targeted industry for my brands. And after I create that knowledge panels, for instance, Google started to show my client within other competitors' brand SERP as well. So it was a good connection in people else's questions, or in also the local search, I started to appear these places. So it's also not just about dominating your own SERP, but also you can a little bit jump on your competitors too, which is most valuable traffic.
One of the interesting things about that is once you've jumped on your competitors' SERP and the people also search for the entity boxes at the bottom of the SERP, they're really difficult to get rid of. They're one of the hardest things to control. So this is something that almost none of your competitors will actually be able to deal with. You'll be sitting on their brand SERP and they won't be able to do anything about it.
And I think you've mentioned that you can also optimize for FAQ section on their SERPs and appear there.
That's another example. I mean, if you want to encroach on other people's brand SERP, the advantages of mastering your own brand SERP means you can actually start to look at how you might be able to encroach on your competitors' brand SERP. And I'm sure the boss of any company will be terribly pleased to be able to do that. There's actually an echo. I think, Koray, you might have an echo on your microphone. Right. So, and the more you master your own branded search, the more you can potentially encroach on your competitors' branded search. So the people also ask which is what you're talking about. And I like to talk about building from the brand SERP outwards, and that goes for your SEO strategy, your digital strategy more generally, but also that question and answer strategy, the FAQ section. You start with the PAA that appear on your brand SERP. You expand those. You move on to the questions underlying those questions by clicking on the result to the next page. You use Koray's technique of looking at the drop-down menu when you start searching for things. You look at the related search at the bottom, and you build out the questions around your brand. You answer them simply, one question answer per page, not the Accordion system, which won't function. And as you grow that out, you're answering the questions that your users, your audience are asking about and around your brand. That has to be valuable because they're searching for that on Google. They don't come to your site and search for it on your site. They go to Google and search for it. So you need to be number one for every single question around and about your brand.
And Dave, maybe you've even used machine learning for that?
I mean, now I work with machine learning practitioners more than I tootle around with it myself. I sort of struggle with an occasional collab here and there, and have some fun with that sort of stuff. But I have a lot of great phone of friends to assist me on making that work. But looking into talking about looking into the machine. So yes, on that one, and Jason, I use different systems, but you actually have it as a free tool on your site, the Knowledge Graph Explorer. One of the benefits I think of Brand SERP, well, actually I know, so I won't even say I think, I know of understanding brand search. Came up a couple years ago when somebody had come to me and they'd done a site move, and it was a total train wreck. And a lot of the lessons that I had picked up from brand search helped me immeasurably in figuring out what the problem was, that I would not have known had that not been something that I had done, or were I not, like Koray, digging into patents and going that side. And it ended up coming into the machine ID and the confusion over the confidence score of how this move was handled. So they were still thinking of an old company name as a new one. And it was only because by that point, I had learned enough about Brand SERP to respect what Jason had been talking about, going back to meeting him 5 years ago and going, oh, okay, this is a thing. And then actually understanding which tools to go, oh, okay, this actually is in the machine. The machine is not understanding what we are and what we're doing. So now we need to go to just the typical brand search reinforcement. We need to make that happen. But I knew exactly where the problem was. I knew, okay, we need to weaken this one, strengthen this one. Both of these two things are causing some confusion there.
Can I add something there? Because a lot of that was really like the geeky machine learning side, and people go, oh, there's nothing I can really do because I don't have Dave's or Koray's knowledge, or Olesia's knowledge for that matter. But in fact, I have a series called the Daily Brand SERP, and I just look at a brand SERP and I provide 1 to 2 minute explanation about what I'm seeing. And the example of looking at a brand SERP and figuring out a problem is that, for example, I can immediately see by looking at the brand SERP if the page is no indexed, if the robots.txt says disallow, or even if there's a redirect problem, automatic geo-targeted redirect problem, or if you don't have the rich site links, you know that you've got a site structure problem or a content problem on those basic pages like Contact Us and About Us. So what's really interesting is that you can look at a brand SERP and get a really good idea of some of the really major technical SEO problems that might exist. And I found that incredibly exciting and interesting because you can do it at a glance. Whee! I love brand SERPs.
Yeah, there's a question actually, which is the latest one, but it is about what we are speaking. It's by Christy Brocado. Can you explain one question per page with the Accordion approach? Do you separate your FAQs into different pages per question, or maybe?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was a bit of a throwaway comment that I made. Basically, the idea of an accordion system is that you search for something, you come on the page, but then what happens is the user has a really bad experience. They have to go through all of them to find the question they were actually asking, whether it's a search on your own site or whether it's a search on Google. When it's one question per page, you can actually just say, right, here is the answer on my mobile. I turn up, I've got the simple answer to my simple question. I'm satisfied. And everything's hunky-dory and wonderful. And then if you want to, you can put the related questions underneath. That's a really good idea. You want to divide or organize your FAQ into categories. So I say the basic categories are your brand and around your brand, or the topic that the brand is an expert in. And then within that, you would have subcategories. And for me, the really important thing that most people miss out on is something my ex-wife taught me about graphic design, is you want to make it infinitely scalable, infinitely adaptable. You should think of every possibility, and it should always fit easily and logically into one of the categories you've created. If you do that, you don't have to reorganize your whole FAQ 3 years down the line, which is always very complicated, also always very dangerous. So 2 basic categories: your brand, around the brand, the topic of the brand, and then subcategories depending on your industry and your audience and their interests and their questions. But definitely 1 QA per page. Seems like a lot, but it actually works really well. And the other thing is you don't have to create 300 words for every single page. If a question only takes 50 words to answer, 50 words will do it. Don't overthink it. Don't fluff it out. Think of yourself as a user. If you were going to that page and you were expecting a really short 50-word answer and it gave you 2,000 words, you would be very frustrated and annoyed. You would bounce and that page would end up not ranking. So be pragmatic, be logical, think like your own audience. Lovely.
I know that Koray certainly has something to add to that. Do
Ooh, I
you
bet he
do
does,
it
yeah.
the same way?
Yeah. Jen Hill actually has a great question. She asks that if someone clicks a link from your SERP and if she or he goes the competitor SERP, what we can do? Actually, in Koray Gübür, there is a kind of text management section for that too, because you can actually extract all of the people else's questions from your competitors and also from your SERP. And then you can also extract the answers from there. And from the most possible and relevant web page sample, you can create a kind of answer. And then, since Google will be able to classify these or cluster these questions and answers together, from time to time, they will start to switch the answers and start to test them out. And once your answer is better than theirs, they will start to choose your answers, and you will be able to occupy other people's or other competitors' SERP as well. So being able to generate more sources also will be necessary, because if you answer a single question from a single domain or source multiple times, probably Google will choose the most popular one and they will cluster it. But if you have multiple websites and if you have multiple answers from different websites too, it will increase your chance for this type of an invasion. I am not saying that use that, but it will be a methodology there too.
What I love about that answer is that I built the Kalicube Pro platform and Koray is using it in ways I had never thought of.
Well, I love that answer too, because like it heads right into the practical. It is what I really appreciated about that answer is like, okay, yes, it'd be great if we all just had Accordion or separate spaces, this and this. But in the people also asked, they're going to pick from multiple sources. So, you know, I'm sure, like, yeah, I get why Koray didn't want to go, and so do this and go and like get your answers in a bunch of different places. But practically speaking, if you want to control the message and the people also asked, go and put your answers in multiple places.
And what's astonishing about the people also ask is the lack in brand SERPs of control that the brands have. 10% of brands actually control any of those people also ask. They think their brand SERP looks wonderful, and it probably does, but they're not answering the basic questions around their brand. And that's a really strong signal that you aren't addressing the questions and the problems of your audience directly. And that's a big miss, not just on your brand SERP, but throughout your business. You're missing your audience and what their needs are.
And if we return a bit to how to make it more valued and more important, maybe there are some quick wins. Also, I know that it takes a long time working with your knowledge panel and your brand SERP, but for example, recently, like a few months ago, Google started making knowledge panels for podcasts. And there is a question from Normand Lemieux. How important was your podcast, Jason, in getting such a beautiful SERP? I've even seen some people naming podcasts with their company name or their own name and making it as if it's their own knowledge panel because it's very easy. You like get it in 1 week or two and you are having it already. So
right.
maybe there are some other fast things you can do to get your brand SERP beautiful and shiny.
Well, can I just answer the two questions that I've just heard there, and then I'll let Dave answer the quick wins on the brand SERP. Number one is the podcast didn't play any role in that beautiful brand SERP at all. I built it without the podcast. The podcast came later on. The podcast is an addition, and that also brings to mind the fact that the podcast is not the same entity as me. So I've called it With Jason Barnard, and that was a test to see how well I could control it, because there's immense ambiguity between With Jason Barnard and With Jason Barnard, the entity. And so the idea of naming your podcast after your company or after yourself creates ambiguity that's going to hit you in the face further down the line, because Google's not going to be able to distinguish between Jason Barnard, let's say, the podcast, and Jason Barnard, the person. I've made that mistake so many times. I'll give you an example. Buwan Koala, the blue dog and yellow koala. And if you haven't heard of them before, please do watch any of my shows. I always talk about them. Called Buwan Koala. It's 2 different characters. It's a TV show. It's a website. It's a song. It's actually multiple versions of that song on multiple albums. And that becomes an immense problem because Google doesn't know whether I'm talking about the fictional universe, the characters themselves, the TV series, the web series, the song, the other song, the actual fact that somebody had written that song, the existence of that song. And that's 7 different entities, and I'm not even trying. That was really stupid. It was back in 1998. So the problem didn't exist, so I can excuse myself from that stupidity. But naming multiple entities with the same exact string of characters is phenomenally difficult to deal with further down the line, and I would advise not to go for that particular quick win if you've got a long-term strategy. Dave, quick wins for the Brand SERP, sorry.
I mean, there's the default, like, claim your business listing, make sure it's complete. Like, that's just a given, right? Like we all have that. One of the unsung hero areas, and I can't think of an exception, so I'm just going to say every company I've ever worked with has skipped the fact that posts are on your Brand SERP and they're a really, really fast and easy win. And to list an example, there was a company we were working for. They did outdoor adventure stuff. When they had Memorial Day sales and things like that, we'd put a great big graphic link through. It only increased their sales by about 4 or 5%. But that's 4 or 5% from a post that took about 40 seconds to put up there. So the big wins to me circles back to the same thing as the reputation management side is if you can control the message, you control the message. If you have the ability to go, oh, I regularly put posts here. I'm a vacation rental owner and I have this one property that we can't rent out. We'll put it up there. Like just these simple things to just get eyeballs in front of something. And it can be in just sort of the center, but I'm referring to the sort of knowledge panel right now. If you have your Twitter stream in there, you can control the message. There's opportunities all over the board, but the one with the concrete, because I actually had to measure it for the client, was a 4 to 5% increase in sales from this specific promotion over previous events, just from one post that literally, we already have the graphics. Like it took about 40 seconds to put together and was super simple and increased their sales. So the KPI was great.
Great to have some quick wins. What you can do very quickly and have something very beautiful and nice and beneficial in your Brand SERP.
It's nice to be able to show somebody too what money they made. Now, something that I think gets overlooked, and this is on a slightly different tangent, but we talk about Brand SERPs a lot. On the Brand SERP tangent, I think investigating your competitor's Brand SERP can have as much and potentially, well, maybe not more value, but as much value. Like when we're talking about, people also asked, well, if there's a leader in your industry, look at theirs, because that's what's coming. If there's different content types, different media types that are appearing, be it images or whatnot, from your competitors, well, you probably just don't have it or don't have any that have crossed that like auction-based sort of threshold to get appearing on the page, but they're meant to be there or potentially meant to be there if you can just fill those gaps up. So I think on competitor queries, you can really find where the opportunities exist. That you might just be missing because you don't have that media, or you might just be missing because you're younger than they are and they're a little more established and they can sort of guide you in the direction you should be going.
Yes, and especially differences between the search engine result pages. It's a really great signal, actually. And imagine that your competitor shows different types of video carousels there and also social media carousels. And imagine that they have more site-wide links than you. And also imagine that they appear in the related search terms in your SERP, but you don't appear for them. And let's say they have more different types of auto-completions than you. And there are lots of things that actually we can test on the Brand SERP. For instance, on my SERP, if I don't tweet for 6 or 7 days, the Twitter carousel, it disappears. And if I tweet suddenly, usually Google indexes it like in 20 minutes. But if after 7 days, it takes 2 hours. So it means that actually they stop checking it. And instead of checking it maybe every 20 minutes, they start to check it in every 2 hours. So even this type of small configurations. It shows how the search engine thinks. They try to save energy. Instead of, if I didn't tweet for 7 days, it means that they start to think that, okay, this guy is just on the holiday or some vacation, so we should check other people's SERP from after that moment. So even these type of things can show it. For instance, sometimes there are really, really big trending things in the Twitter. And I always wonder how they unite the hashtag and also the query. Because let's say there is a kind of big event, and when you search that thing on the SERP or on the Google, on the SERP, you will have a Twitter carousel. And I always wonder how they choose which tweet should be there from which account. So even these type of things might be relevant to the entitization of the brands. They can choose the most authoritative and most relevant and most active brand from Twitter just for that topic. There are lots of APIs, the paid programs just for Twitter. And imagine that Google, what kind of technology they have for tracking their social competitors. So I believe they use their own data too. At least in the patents, they use them to track or even to give points or scores to the influencers. Even it exists. So in this context, if you're able to think like them, after a point, the SEO will be easier. And knowledge panels are a great hint, or the brand SERPs are great hints to read their minds.
Before we move on to the next question, I just want to draw attention to something I'd never thought of before. That was a great answer, but there was a gem in there that I just want to point out because I've never thought of it. So I'm wondering if other people might not have. I have never thought of autocomplete as part of a brand search. It's never entered my head that is part of a brand search.
I'll make a point. Koray keeps pointing it out to me, and I'm desperately trying to think, how can I incorporate that into CaliQ Pro? Koray's got so much of a head start on me on that particular aspect. I'm going to desperately try to catch up.
Okay, myself, my quick win is usually checking the schema of the website I'm dealing with, and there's usually so many mistakes or so many missing things that you just fix them and this works like a charm. Yeah.
Have you finished? Sorry, excuse me.
Also the structure, but okay, yeah, I'd better give you the
I'll give my quick win and then go back to you for another quick win. The rich site links underneath the homepage, they're the best quick win in the world. If you don't have them, you should have them. 50% of brands don't have them, which I think is a phenomenal miss. And that's all to do with site structure, proper meta titles, actual content in your contact page, your login page, your about us page, because those are the pages that Google wants to put there. Your category pages, if you haven't got a chunk of content that explains what the page does, what role it plays, what help it can give to your audience when they're searching your brand name, it won't become a rich site link. And that's why I thought about it, is because schema markup, the type of page, web page, about page, contact page, incredibly powerful, incredibly helpful. And I did an experiment with Wix, so I'm going to write that up. And we did this in a couple of weeks. That's a quick win.
And also, when we were previously talking about all that, when we were testing the webinar, Dave, you've mentioned that, well, it was very important for you to check your entity and your brand in trends. Can you tell about that for everybody? So, because it was very interesting.
Well, and I do think it is just generally important. Where you hit, depending on the brand, of course, it's going to host different values. But for example, if you're looking at a scenario where I'll go with the company I work for, and we were doing a funding round, understanding what's going on in the trends around your brand is incredibly important. Understanding maybe not necessarily where it is, because Google Trends only shows you out of 100, right? But so you don't know specifically what that means. You'll have to go into your analytics and kind of reverse engineer that back. But understanding how your branded queries are over time either strengthening, weakening, or peaking at specific times, I think is incredibly important. If you're doing something like, say, doing a funding round, or throwing a promotion, or doing whatever it is that your company might be doing at a peak moment, just for timing. to make sure that, oh, okay, we know that this trend happens, or we know that we're in a growth pattern right now, so we can predict the future. Like there's a whole bunch of questions that can be answered. So I can't tell the audience, these are all the questions. We were looking for growth and peak points. Like that's what I was looking for, was I want to be able to report on growth. And I also want to report on peak points. Like, is there a right time to do this over others, which can be hard to tell if you're in a peak point, because you don't know when that might end. So you might just have to pull the trigger at some point and go, okay, that's just done. But yeah, I think Google Trends for your brand can be incredibly telling. It can be difficult at times, like incredibly difficult. I work for a company called Weights and Biases. That's also just a term. Like it's also just a machine learning term. So it can get a bit clouded, but that's also something else that can be very telling when you're looking at Google Trends is, does Google understand that Weights and Biases is both a search term and a company? And if they understand that we are a company and we are a search term, that tells us something about crossing that threshold.
Yeah, and that indicates that you've managed to disambiguate that incredibly ambiguous query, because it's exactly the same thing, and it says, yes, this is a company. And if you've got a company that's named after something that's incredibly common, Yellow Door is my favorite example, it's incredibly difficult to disambiguate. And I know Koray's had a lot of experience with that, but if you're going to name your company, give it a unique name right now, because otherwise you're creating a big set of problems for yourself in terms of Google understanding your brand. Sorry, Olesia.
Because Koray explained his work with trends, can you repeat what he told us when you were trying to disambiguate and to differentiate your entity for one of your clients, and it was not a company, this one, for your trends?
That was for Koray, yeah? Is that correct?
Yes.
I couldn't hear the question clearly. Sorry. Can you repeat it for me?
Because we were discussing trends and entities, do you remember that case when one of your clients looked themselves in trends?
Yeah. Okay, I remember that. So the thing is, this is actually a little bit more complicated, because I believe they store this type of data in different databases, and sometimes there is no correlation between them. For instance, I have created one entity within the knowledge base with the help of Wikipedia, and it appeared in Google Trends. But when I click that entity, for instance, it says 404. It doesn't show the entity there, for instance. And this is like that over 6 months. So I really don't know why I didn't correlate it yet. So maybe it was a kind of bug, or maybe they didn't buy it in the trends. So another thing is that in Google Trends, when you search for one of the entities, they always show the kind of the entity there. And the other day, one of my clients, he was just asking that our company or our organization has been named as a topic there, but our competitor is clearly a company, because Google defines them as a company. So there are multiple possibilities there, because the competitor on their Wikipedia page, these type of things a little bit require Wikipedia understanding. And I can tell that Wikipedia is also a search engine, and there are lots of different annoying rules there. Even if because of just one single comma, you can lose your 2 weeks of web pages, and they even don't have to make any kind of explanations to you. So be careful about that. But the thing is, on the competitor, there is a kind of knowledge table, and on the table, it is defined as company. So in our situation, actually, I didn't create that, because I know that if I update that web page, one of the editors will start to dig in the latest updated pages, and they can delete it. So to be able to not risk it, I didn't change it. But it also shows that how they can define a specific entity just based on the most authoritative web page and the key facts or key points there. So if the Google Trends says that your entity is actually a topic, it means that they didn't define, or they didn't give an entity type in a clear way there. And they can use multiple different attributes or general attributes there. But if it says that this is a company, it means that actually there will be specific attributes, and they will especially focus on these type of queries or these type of information to relate that entity to the other sections. Topic on the trends is a kind of general term. It means that it's an entity. And also it can be read in the Google Trends documents too, on the support section on Google.
Which makes me think the differentiation between a company and a topic, you're talking about attributes. the more firm, definitive attributes that you can attribute to your entity as a company. So founded date, founded country, founders, address, and so on and so forth, the better your chances are of disambiguating between topic and entity once again, and becoming an entity, a topic and company. But I would love to do a whole new episode on that, because digging into attributes that are attached to entities and avoiding using Wikipedia is a whole topic I could spend 3 or 4 hours talking with you guys about. So let's not start, because we've already done an hour.
Yeah, because we now need to wrap up a bit, but I'd like you to say something, because we could not cover all the questions and we are much more ahead of time, but maybe you wanted to mention something, some example, some case, anything that you like. Dave, is there something you want to share that we have not touched upon?
It's so like there's like a million different routes to go on this one. But like I don't want to go with the typical, because I'm sort of like I've already noted that the courses are handy. But for folks, go to Calicube. Even if it's just the free tools, there's some useful stuff there to just sort of play around with to get an idea for what's going on. But in the beginning, for folks that haven't paid attention to this so far, this is sort of your first introduction into Brand SERP. Get back to, I would start with basics. Olesia, you talked about schema. Dig in there, right? Like understand it, understand how to expand it as much as you can into the related. Like I like to get your same as's in there. Go like, here's my founders, right? Like that's a big one to me, right? Like disambiguate as much as you can from different ones. My name's Dave Davies. Like I have to disambiguate because there's more famous versions than me out there, many of them. So getting back to the schema, getting back to claiming your business and making sure it's full, and then just looking at your brand or your competitors' brands or yours, and just figuring out which message do I control and how do I move them up. And that's the biggest thing that I would say people just starting out really need to be looking at. And
Koray, what would you add on your part?
Maybe I can add something about schema, because for a long time, I actually used the programmable search engine expansion of Google. The programmable search engine is basically customizable search engine from Google. I believe most SEOs already used it. And they have added 2 new sections there. And one of them says topic, the other one says the schema. So in other words, in your programmable search engine, you can actually tell to the sub Google systems, create me a search engine result page for this query, and only takes the web pages that use this specific schema or that mentions that specific topic. So it actually shows that they create different types of indices or index samples from different schema types from different topics. And when you search for a query, they take all of the possible contexts, and then they start to distribute these possible indices to the final product according to the probabilities, according to the relevance, and according to the dominance. So in this context, using the programmable search engine for understanding these type of entities, a little bit tweaking it, a little bit poking it, or testing it, basically, it might be useful to understand how my SERP is created there. So you can create your own test environment by using Google's own subsystems.
That's
wow.
great.
Can I add one thing that isn't schema? Because I'd really like to point out that, I mean, schema markup is incredibly powerful. It's incredibly interesting. It's incredibly geeky. And if you know nothing about schema markup and you're not interested in schema markup, I just wrote a book, and schema markup gets 2 mentions on 1 little paragraph of the entire book. And the book allows you to actually do all of this. Schema markup doesn't even come into it. Schema markup comes into the course, and it comes into Calicube Pro. For me, those are more advanced techniques. If you're looking at this and saying, what can I actually do to help my brand SERP without getting a developer involved? There are so many things to do, starting with your homepage, your rich site links. Fundamentally important, all your social media channels. We said it at the beginning, and I'd like to reiterate. Social media channels, your social media profiles, 3, perhaps 4 on your brand SERP. And all you have to do is engage with your audience, so you win on both sides. So from my perspective, those quick wins we were talking about, start with your homepage, start with your rich site links, your social media channels, which includes YouTube. Get all of those nailed. All of that will start to build towards Google's understanding and its confidence in its understanding of who you are, what you do, who your audience is. Once it's understood that, it will represent your brand with your message to your audience when they search your brand name. And that is the foundation of everything I'm talking about.
Okay. So one of my quick wins, which I didn't mention, it was Koray Gübür Pro, actually, because you can just go into Koray Gübür Pro and you don't need to think about anything at all. It's all written there and you just follow whatever it says to you. And it's like no brainer. It's easy and it's quick. It saves you lots of time. And the second one is reviews. We have not touched upon reviews a lot, but I suggest people creating different places for their reviews of their own, which they do control. This, I do suggest you create another review subdomain, review page on your website and on other everywhere, not just Yelp or some big companies or big websites. Create something that you can control for reviews, especially, and you'll see how advantageous it can be for you in the long run. So, thank you very much for everyone who has been watching us. You can contact our experts, Dave, Jason, Koray, in Twitter, and just maybe Google their names and see what appears there and go and contact them there. Thank you very much once again. I think we are, yeah, it's Brand SERP Guy, Jason, and you can also leave your comments under the video and maybe Anton will tell us and we'll return to answer them, especially Koray, Jason and Dave. So whatever you may need, maybe we'll be wrapping up.
Thank you so much, Olesia. That was brilliantly hosted. I much appreciate it. And you three are, as I said, my dream team to talk about this stuff.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.